Hello, and welcome to GPJFF in Conversation. It's such a treat to have you both here to talk about Shiva Baby.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Well, it's lovely to see you. And for any festival goers tonight who are new to the festival, my name is Olivia Antsis, and I'm the Executive Artistic Director of GPJFF. I'll be moderating tonight's conversation and sharing your questions with Emma and Rachel a little later in our discussion. So be sure to submit your questions or comments in the Ask a Question box located at the bottom of your screen. So before we begin, I must congratulate both of you on the success of Shiva Baby. And for those, oh, you're very welcome. and for those out there who are not up on their Variety or IndieWire or whatnot, the film has received lots of love from critics, and both Emma and Rachel have been lauded for their respective roles in bringing the story to life. Emma, of course, for her sharp screenplay and direction, and Rachel for her brilliant performance as Danielle. Now, when you both were making this film, I'm sure you could have never imagined that this feature would be released by virtual means amid a worldwide pandemic. How was this experience of talking to press and different festival audiences for you both? And was there anything about this process that surprised you in a good way?
Yeah, I would say that I think initially, and I'll speak for myself, we were very disappointed, but I think I immediately just had super low expectations, as I think a lot of people in many industries did. I just didn't see how film festivals or films in general were going to adapt to a lockdown and a quarantine around the world. So to see the amount of festivals that have pursued the virtual model, and the amount of audience members and press participation and everything, like, all ends of it has been really inspiring and exciting. And that has surprised me throughout. And that even local Jewish film festivals or queer film festivals or big ones or small, like everywhere sort of, it doesn't feel like anything stopped. So that's been surprising in a good way. But I think Rachel and I can both relate to like so much stress when it comes to Wi-Fi of like press from home.
Oh my God.
Like living in LA now, and like I'm living at home with my parents, and our Wi-Fi was so bad. So when we were doing press for TIFF, it was like we just got a puppy, and he was like chewing on my foot, like, and my parents were like fighting in the background, like. And then Rachel got to LA and like didn't have Wi-Fi. I won't speak for you, but it's been an experience.
Well, doing Q&As when I was with my family, I literally was like, "Everyone out of this room." People would be like, "Does anyone know where I was like, "Everyone leave." And then I didn't have Wi-Fi when I first got here, which was stressful too for Q&A. But I will say, like, a positive I do think is that some people who wouldn't have been able to see the film are now able to see it because all of these festivals are online. And I think that's a positive. And obviously we were bummed initially, but I do think it's been really cool to see how the industry has been able to adapt and do all of these events online.
Well, definitely speaking from the point of view of the presenter, it's definitely been stressful, but we really enjoy meeting with everybody, and it's been an interesting experience, and we're just happy we can have that sort of festival experience through the computer somehow. I mean, the fact that we have these platforms is kind of a blessing. So thank you very much for overcoming the hurdles and joining us. So the film began as a short that you made while you were at NYU. Can you talk about what drew you to this character and the story to begin with, Emma?
Sure. I think I initially was drawn to just making something achievable for a student film, and that meant doing it in a world that I understood. So I wanted it to be at a Jewish family function because I felt like for a final project in school, it was just doable, like one setting, characters I knew and dialogue I knew. And then I sort of made it as just like a really fun sort of, in my head, like screwball comedy. And then the more I went through it, I realized I was just sort of putting a lot of my insecurities and the like various pressures that I was feeling, whether it was from myself and my insecurities or from my family or my community or like school and just like general pressures, you know, coming to a head as it often does for lots of young people when they're graduating. So I think I was just drawn to the portraying something about the anxiety I was feeling at the time, and also the sense of, you know, like just figuring out your self-worth and like realizing how much as a young woman sometimes it's been based off just sex and sexual power. So that was what drew me most to it with the short. And then I just tried to run with that for the feature as well.
Mm-hmm. And Rachel, you were cast in the short, and there was maybe a 3-year time period that went by, or 2.5 years, until you did the production for the feature. Coming back to this character, was there a different perception of Danielle at this moment in her life? Did you bring something new the second time around?
I felt so lucky to be able to do the short and then the feature. And I guess I feel like I had the opportunity to kind of like grow with Danielle, and Emma would send me drafts of the feature script, and I felt like I reading them and like I just got to like let it like marinate, I guess, which I feel like you don't always have the opportunity to do. And I graduated college after we shot the short and before the feature. And I think I did get to experience that feeling of like, even if it's in a loving way, your whole family being like, what's the plan? What are you going to do? What's happening? And you're like, and then, and just that uncertainty, and as well as difficult to relationship. I think that those things helped deepen my understanding of Danielle's journey, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest with you. I knew you made the short, but I still haven't had a chance to see it. But I'm very curious to go back to the short after seeing the feature. I just want to see like your approach to both. So from the opening scene, you get this sense that Danielle is in this constant tug of war between wanting to assert herself and take up space and wanting to hide and disappear. Like when she's having sex with her sugar daddy, she feels empowered and in control. But then when the act is over, her sense of self is overshadowed by this expectation that everyone has around her, of her. Emma, can you talk about why you wanted to explore this dynamic in Danielle?
Yeah, I think lots of people can relate to having different versions of themselves for different communities or people they are with. But I think especially when you are sort of at that age of graduation and you're a young woman, but I think young people in general can probably relate to this. You feel so much like an adult, but at the same time, especially, you know, if you have the benefit of your parents helping you financially, you are so not an adult in so many ways. And so you're kind of straddling this line of independence and a complete lack of independence and being seen as, you know, a child. So I think I wanted to put her, I wanted to be able to show two sides of the same coin, and be able to show someone who's trying to be so many different versions of herself in one setting. Because I think, you know, she has her sort of like nice Jewish girl, like sweet, docile mode that she's with her family. And then she has her empowered, incredibly confident, and kind of like cold persona that she has with her sugar daddy. And then she has her dynamic with Maya. And I think, you know, I think that I just thought it would be fun to have anybody, but especially someone I could relate to, have to kind of confront different versions of themselves and try to like save face. Because I feel like often we're not put in that position where we have to like tap into the like 20 different versions of ourselves that we are to like so many people.
Yeah, and it's interesting how, you know, even through the camera movement and all the different sort of like levels of claustrophobia you feel as, you know, envisioning you in that position that Rachel, you were in throughout this whole entire movie. It's just interesting to see like how these little nuances in the look in your eyes or like your facial expression sort of let us into this internal life that Danielle is going through, you know, trying to be different people at all times to, you know, sort of negate what you want for yourself, but also make them happy or fulfill their expectation. So I think you did a great job at doing that throughout the film.
She did.
So based on your depiction of Danielle's parents and the Jewish community she grew up in, we can empathize with Danielle's level of anxiety and the defense mechanisms we see at play. When you were writing the screenplay, Emma, knowing that Danielle's parents and Shiva guests would play such a large role in establishing both the comedy and the suspense in the film, how did you strike the right chord between expressing these characters' genuine love and concern for Danielle and being just utterly overbearing, judgmental, and petty? Like, were you worried that your characters would somehow come across as like just a little too much, like too shticky or too caricaturish, like being like kind of mean and overbearing in the way that they were at some points?
Definitely. I think that I can only speak to my community and, you know, the family I come from. But I think sometimes when I sort of write down experiences in my family, whether it be my immediate or my extended, it feels almost like if I wrote it down, it would be stereotypical. Like it's just sometimes like it's really hard to walk the fine line because sometimes it's just true, but it's about choosing, you know, how much you want to put in there. I think that for me, what felt most important was that the parents have a real, you know, many layers to them, and that I think often Jewish parents, especially Jewish mothers, are portrayed in like super naggy, like in sort of what you're saying, the like overbearing, judgmental way. And they can be, but more than anything, like, you know, what I don't see enough with Jewish mothers on film is how much love and support there is. And that's, you know, obviously I feel the most from my mom. I guess not obviously, but that's how I feel. So it felt important in terms of that question, like in terms of sort of striking that balance, that the parents kind of try to fulfill that versus everybody else. I felt like, you know, in order to achieve this downfall for Danielle and have everyone coming at her from every corner, I felt like I could, you know, I didn't worry as much about those other characters seeming well-rounded because sometimes they're only there for 30 seconds. But all of those I took from word for word from experiences I had at Shiva's, in terms of people asking what you're doing or whatever. So I tried to really just make it, I did think about that consciously and tried to do the best I could for the parents. And then I'd say I was a little more sort of casual with everybody else because I wanted them to chip away at Rachel, at Danielle.
And did your parents or people in your Jewish community see the film, and did they have a reaction to that depiction?
You know, it's interesting. My parents loved it and they're just very supportive and excited and happy for me. But I'm from Toronto, and on one hand, we're very polite people, and I don't think anyone would call me and be like, "This was horrible. This was so stereotypical," or you know whatnot. I've only gotten really supportive messages from extended members of my family that's seen it. However, it's also interesting because it's just virtual, so like it's not like we all attended the same screening at TIFF for the Toronto Jewish Film Festival together, and I could like see their faces. So I can never know, but a lot of them sent me lovely messages and, you know, didn't say anything about being concerned about the way that our family was portrayed. But one of my cousins posted on Facebook being like, "Can't wait to spot all of us in this movie." But, you know, it's an amalgamation of characters.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, you accentuated certain aspects for the sake of comedy, you know, and the symbolism. So it's not like you're doing a literal, you know, translation, but you know, you took elements of truth and then, you know, kind of manipulated them for the sake of the film. So I'm sure they get that.
So yes.
So, Rachel, you totally owned this role. You were absolutely amazing. And you made the character of Danielle both relatable and sympathetic. And I know that in addition to acting, you're a stand-up comedian. So you already know the importance of timing and nuance when it comes to making a joke or delivering a funny line or having a particular facial expression, land with an audience. So can you talk about how your experience as a comedian influenced the comedy in this film and your collaboration with Emma?
Yeah, I feel like the script was already so funny and good. And I think that it was like so fun to just like, I feel like there were so many funny parts that were already written in that were just fun to do. And Emma would like direct me to try them different ways, which was really fun. Like, I remember that even with the short, when we were first working together, when she would like whisper a little thing in my ear of like, and just like of a different direction to take it in. So that was always really fun. And then there were also bits where we got to like improv with each other, and the whole cast was so good and so funny. Like Fred and Polly, to have them play my parents was so exciting and fun, and they're hilarious. Like literally, I had to sometimes be like, you have to have your breakdown, because they would be so good together and so funny. But yeah, there was opportunities to improv, and that was really fun too.
Is there any example that you can give the audience of a scene that ended up, being an improv that you left in the film?
I think the girl boss line was that, yeah.
There were a lot of lines. Like she sprinkled a lot of her comedian, like her shtick into the. We never improvised a scene, but Rachel definitely, the girl boss one made it in.
That was definitely perfect for that specific point in the film.
But I'd also say Rachel read so many drafts of the script that she would suggest lines to me, so I would just write them in, like Jackie Hoffman's line of like, oh, maybe you could run marches. That was Rachel's idea when she's like, I study gender, and then Molly and then Jackie added like with the pink pussy hats, and then Molly Gordon added like, well, that's perfect because you love to march and you love to knit. So everyone hated each other. But I would say Rachel had a lot of improv technically beforehand by just like suggesting lines to me. So now I'm trying to remember, like, I feel like there were probably tons more that I can't think of ideas that you had for lines.
One of my favorite lines in the film is that recurring confusion over Danielle's career prospects, and how like she connects the undergraduate degree with like merging with her entrepreneurial interests, and then when she's like in that scene with the parents and Max, and she clarifies that her major is the business of gender, and explaining it's like gender business. I mean, I did not deliver that right at all, but you did in the film. It was amazing. And also the funny thing is if you look at her sex life as more of an internship, then the transactional nature of a relationship totally makes sense. So it wasn't off at all. So my question is, how did the sex positive exploration of gendered female identity sit with different audiences? Has the response to the film been positive regardless of age, gender, or level of their religiosity? Or did you find that the film really resonated with some audiences over others?
I mean, I feel like I've been very shocked by how much it has resonated across the board with Jewish audiences, with queer audiences, and with just like regular festivals that don't have a specific audience. I have found that the most people reaching out to me are young women, specifically queer young women. And I can see someone already asked a question that's saying this is a win for bisexuals, which is great. So I will say across the board, no matter what festival we've played, whether it be a Jewish film festival or a queer one or TIFF or wherever, it's been a lot of young queer women reaching out that I think it's resonating the most with. However, like it's been wild to see like queers from all backgrounds and ages like say they loved it, and Jewish people of all ages say that they love it. I'm sure I'm not hearing from the people who don't like it, but it's definitely surprised me in the fact that it's kind of been positive, and the questions have kind of been the same from every festival, like about sex positivity and queerness and Jewishness and all this stuff. That it doesn't really matter. So I feel like I haven't gotten, an older Jewish person being like, I loved how sex positive it was. Like, that's like my parents' age or anything, but they're like, I loved it, so people have a different response to it, but no one's been like, that was, I don't know, like, like no one's had like a hot take like that, but I think that like, positivity has resonated probably the most with young women.
And adding to sort of the whole field that you were going for, your cinematography and musical score definitely added to the sense of claustrophobia and anxiety that Danielle is feeling. So I heard that you worked really closely with your composer and cinematographer to elevate the sense of dread in both the way the film was shot and through this horror-like score. So, and also, of course, just the excruciating sound of that crying baby.
I worked with the DP, the baby, and our composer. Those were my three.
Well, you're not related to this child, are you?
Oh no, I wish I was, because we cared for him, but
oh my God.
But yeah,
I hope that this child gets to redeem themselves in their next film, because oh my God, I just wanted to close that child. Be like, no more screaming.
He was such a trooper. It was his first role, and we had never also directed babies before. It was a bunch of young, like 20-somethings being like, let's just have a baby, and like totally not knowing what to do. Anyway, so he pulled through. Edgar, he was a champ.
He nailed that role.
He did. He really did.
Yeah. So, how did you prepare for this with your cinematographer and the composer?
Yeah. So our cinematographer Maria Rucci, who's incredible, spent before we shot, off and on for about a year almost, trying to figure out the look with me, because I'd had the short and I sort of used transparent as my main reference for that, and just kind of stamped it with the transparent style of like handheld and kind of warm and glowy. But I think we were trying to figure out like how to shoot this like not a romantic comedy, because I think all my writing comps were like wonderful films like Obvious Child and a lot of Jewish rom-coms like Kissing Jessica Stein and whatever, and I think we kept on trying to think about how to make it different so that it stands out. So we worked really closely together on trying to look at anxiety-driven films and claustrophobic films and films that take place in one day in one location or a few days in one location, and like how different cinematographers use the space in a claustrophobic way that feels dynamic and different. So we ended up kind of having a shorthand of like trying to do the Graduate thing, or trying to do like the opening night thing here, or trying to do Krisha. Like we had sort of like a few touchstones of cinematic references that we used for photography. And then I would say editing also really helped with the tension and the pacing. Like our initial cut was like 90 minutes, and I just give a lot of the credit to the tension to Hannah Park, because she really, I think, really elevated the sort of sense of you never being able to pause. And then working with Ariel Marks, our composer, totally took me by surprise, because I didn't think I wanted to work with music at all in this movie. And then once we were shooting, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be so good to have music, and having like anxious string plucks. And I didn't really realize we were putting together a horror score, so to speak. She sent me a violin library, and I picked all the sounds that I liked the most, and all the sounds that I picked were like horror sounds. So it was trial and error with Ariel, because it was really hard to figure out a horror score for a comedy. And I just think she did such a good job, and she was very patient with me to try to figure out the right sound. So I would say every one of our collaborators, and department heads were extremely patient and gave me a lot of their time to really sit with how to make it the best thing, because one location, one day movies are just or show, whatever it is, it's just hard to do. It feels stale so quickly. And I feel like I am very grateful for all of those women giving me a lot of time to really just like figure out the best way that you can't feel like, oh, we're still in this house. Like, can we just leave? Like, I'm just tired and bored of it. So, anyway,
and,
yeah.
And how long was the whole shoot?
I think it was 17 days. It was like 17 or 18. Yeah, it was 3 6-day weeks. So we only had 1 day off in between each week.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, we always underestimate just like how much the makeup artists, are owed their credit for just keeping all the characters' continuity going, throughout the shooting.
And doing amazing characters like Lily. That's Lily Lee did, and she had assistants sometimes too, Cecilia and other people. But like, it was mostly just Lily doing like 20 different people a day, like the whole
day, all that, yeah. And then I was coffee and the sweating and it was like the level of wet I was supposed to be, depending on the day.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Were you like checking for continuity, like in your monitor, like you need to be more sweaty at this moment?
So we actually didn't have a script supervisor, which is, if folks who don't, that's like the continuity person, honestly. And we had to choose between paying for a script soup or extras. So all continuity was handled by one of our producers, Katie, and a PA named Clara, and all of us. We were all just like, what was that? We all just had to put our brains together and be like, and we fucked up sometimes. Like there was supposed to be a scene where Rachel was supposed to have like cream cheese all over her face, and like we already shot the scene that followed. So we were like, okay, she can't have cream cheese on her face because we forgot about that when we went and shot that scene. So we did I think a really good job pulling it together. And Lily definitely was just like, you when someone's doing their job, you don't notice. Like when they're doing it really well, it's especially for a director, it's like handled already and you're like not even thinking about it. And I think that's what everyone on our team did. But Lily with the makeup and continuity, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Well, it sounds like you did awesome with, juggling everything and doing the right thing for the resources you had. So I'd love to hear more about both of your influences. So not just specifically to this film, but just in general, like what are your creative influences?
Do you want to go first?
I feel like, well, I guess I can say like movies that I like. It's I feel like I love movies that feature like in-depth female characters that are really complicated and messy. I like dark comedies. I like comedies. I would say, which is why I left this role. And I would say like some of my favorite movies are like Saved is one of my favorite movies. And On the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. Bling Ring. I love Bling Ring. Like I love movies with like complicated, funny, but sometimes fucked up female characters.
Very fun. Like super
and very fun. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Gina Rollins definitely was the queen of fucked up, but fun.
Opening night and one of her other many movies with her husband with Cassavetes. What is the one that Krisha was a big reference for this, and Trey Edward Schultz is a big reference of mine. But what's the movie where she's going crazy in the house? Gina Rollins. I mean, there's many movies like that, but when it's like, you know what I'm talking about? Women Under the Influence. Woman Under the Influence? Is that it?
I feel like she's going crazy in so many movies.
I know. She's going crazy with the house. She's going crazy with a gun. Lots of Gina Rollins. Cassavetes is like a big influence of mine in general. Not Repulsion. Matt is putting Repulsion. It wasn't Repulsion, but also Polanski, despite that he's super problematic, has been an influence too, like Rosemary's Baby and Repulsion. But I think the Coen brothers probably for like their Jewish morbidity, but also the fact that they can do like so many different kinds of genres. Like I think, and Mike Nichols, like I think I love filmmakers who can dip in and out of like so many genres, but it never feels like the Coen brothers try a music film. It just feels like you almost don't question it when they decide to do something different. So those are my favorite kind of filmmakers.
And what do you think you want to try next as a filmmaker? Like, are you gonna continue along this like the road of like self-exploration and womanhood, or are you gonna go like somewhere totally different next?
I think Rachel and I are both interested in later down the line and like in other further projects, delving more into like introspection and, you know, like deeply flawed and interesting female characters. And not to say that the thing that I'm going to say isn't that, but Rachel and I wrote like a really campy, much more in Rachel's style, like ridiculous comedy with two very flawed like female leads, but it's way more fun and way less introspective and way less Jewish. And I think it's just like a lot more fun. So that's the next thing we're doing. But for Rachel to star in. But I think both of us are interested in down the line and are trying to keep doing really interesting in-depth female characters, but also kind of want to have fun and not be stuck in a house.
And do you know what you were saying, Emma, of like trying different genres and like, but keeping that through line depending no matter what the genre is.
Yeah.
And did you meet when Rachel, when you tried out for the short, or were you friends before?
I met Emma when I auditioned for the short, and I feel so lucky to have met her, and we just became friends and started right after the short. We started working on this other project, writing it together, and we just became best friends.
Yeah. Well, I asked Rachel to audition. I'd seen her in a few other thesis films in film school, and I was like, she has the right look. I thought she was Jewish. She isn't, but it doesn't matter. And I would say I just have to also, you know, say it's so nice to do a Q&A with her because she was the biggest motivator, I would say, of me writing the script for the feature. Like, she's a Virgo and was just always like, what are your weekly and monthly goals? Like, are you achieving them? Like, where's the draft? Like, show me the outline. Like, was just always like checking in with me and offering to read drafts and like just keeping me on my game when it was like really hard. And you know, also was just super invested in seeing it, you know, go from short to feature from every single stage, you know, with casting, with this, like she was just always offering to help, which was a huge add, you know, to me and our incredible production team. As you know, our producers, Katie, Kieran, and Lizzie also, you know, busted ass, but you know, Rachel went above and beyond as an actor as well. Like she just wanted to see it get made. So super grateful for that. And that's part of why we like just immediately became best friends after making the short, because we were like, let's make this feature together and ruin our lives by just only doing this for 2 years.
In a different coffee shop every day.
Yeah. And was this are you both in Los Angeles now?
No, I'm in Toronto. I went back to Toronto.
Oh, yeah, you went back to Toronto. Okay.
We were both in New York for...
Oh, both in New York.
Before COVID, yeah.
Oh, okay. And how has the move to Los Angeles been? Is this your first time living there, Rachel?
Yeah, I've been... Actually, it's so crazy. Emma and I were in LA at the beginning of the year before everything. And I remember Emma was doing listening to the sound, the score, like we would do, we were like doing in the day. And then literally Emma would be like, hold on one sec. She's like watching it with us on is like be bright. But it's been good. I'm here right now shooting a comedy for ABC called Call Your Mother, starring Kira Sedgwick, and it's been really fun and also literally so great to have a schedule that is given to me, because the time in COVID, I feel like it's like, what month is it? What day? Which meal am I eating? And so it's been really nice to have that. But yeah.
What is it called? Because your sound went off for a second when you said the name.
Call Your Mother. Call Your Mother.
Oh, Call Your Mother. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I've been liking that. I will say in LA you have to drive, and I thought that I knew how to drive until and it's harder than I thought. And I did already scratch my car. But other than that, loving LA.
Well, I'm really glad that you both found each other, because it's awesome when a director finds a muse, and the muse just is like constantly the source of inspiration, but also like keeping you working and keeping you on point and making sure you're not like letting anything get in the way. Like, you know, that's a good situation. So don't mess it up.
Yeah, you're equally invested. You know what I mean? She's like, "Where's my movie that I'm going to star in?" And I'm like, "Where's the movie I'm gonna So it's good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have lots of questions, so I think we're going to get to some of them now, if this will work. Okay. So first question. Rachel, what was your most memorable experience with this film, and did your character help you understand more about yourself?
Okay, favorite moment and then character. I would say, I think one of my favorite moments was, I mean, one, I just have to say, like, making a movie with your best friend is amazing, and it's so, like, I always knew Emma was talented and so like special, but it was amazing to watch her direct a movie and just be so good. And like I always knew that like being a director is hard, but like everyone, it's just every question, everything, you're just like in charge of everything, and Emma just like handled it with grace and was so good at her job. So I would say it was amazing to see that. There was one specific day before we filmed the scene where Molly and I, who plays Maya, are walking to the car, and it's after everything, and we finally have like an open conversation. And she asked me like, why sugar? And before we filmed that scene, like Emma took me and Molly to the back, and we just like worked out the scene, and it just felt so collaborative. And I really was like, oh, I just trust Emma. I know that we're going to do the scene right. And what was the other, what the character taught me about myself. I think it taught me a lot about power dynamics and relationships. And I think I've definitely felt before where like, oh, I think I have power from like, I think I have sexual power. And then all of a sudden the rug is pulled out and I don't feel that way anymore. And so I think that was definitely, I think just thinking about my growth as like a person from when we started the short to film the feature, I was like learning that lesson in a really drawn out, slow way. And I think that playing Danielle definitely like illuminated that for me.
Great. Let's get to the next. Sorry, I'm a weirdo when I'm reading the questions. I'm like, great, next question. Okay. I feel like the score plays such an important role in the film. It's almost suspenseful. It adds so much style to the film. Was that the intention when you were editing the movie?
Yeah, I think I was just sort of concerned with keeping everybody on the edge of their seat as much as possible, and whether it be considered suspenseful or terrifying or claustrophobic, I think I just wanted to make sure the score was communicating what Danielle is feeling and her anxiety internally. I think that score can be used in so many different ways, especially within a kind of hybrid genre movie like this, like a dark comedy or a thriller comedy or whatever, or a dramedy, whatever it is. You know, it can play to the comedy, it can play to the like jokes, or it can play to the like dramatic moments. Like score can function in so many different ways. And I think I just wanted it to articulate what Danielle is feeling, because this entire movie, she's like never by herself really. And like, she was talking to all these people. And I think, you know, I worried like that people wouldn't really be able to understand how anxious she felt if I didn't have that score. So I think, you know, whether it be perceived as suspenseful or scary or whatever, I was just meant to communicate like what she's feeling.
And Emma, congrats on making such a great debut film. Truly a win for bisexuals. Do you have any advice for young filmmakers looking to break into the industry?
Yeah, I would say like the short, well, thank you. That's awesome. Thank you, Rachel, other Rachel. I think the short to feature route isn't foolproof, but it's very helpful to have something that shows what the tone and the world is of your movie, or a similar character or a taste. I think making shorts is extremely helpful for your ability as a filmmaker to flex your muscles and to learn. But it's also a great way to meet people. It's a great way to establish bonds with people. And especially if that short is something that you would like to make larger, even if it doesn't go to festivals or anything, just having that as like a sizzle even is just so helpful to showcase what you're going for if you want to make a feature, if that's the case. And I'd say working with your best friends, like we already talked about this, but like working with people who are equally invested in the project as you, like, and will hold you accountable, you know, not just it's great to have friends who will read the script and give you notes and like be there for you, which is, it's very important to have that spread among different people because you don't want to put that all in one person. But it's great to have collaborators who are very invested, whether they be actors or producers or, you know, a co-writer, whatever it is. I think working with people that you love that are equally ambitious and hungry as you is really important. I think so many people who are scared in this industry, especially young women, are like, oh, I don't know, like maybe we'll make it in a year or 2 years, but like who knows what's going to happen. And like, I was like, as soon as I graduated, I was like, I'm going to make the feature. And everyone was like, you're crazy. Like, why don't you just wait and work in a writer's room or whatever? And I was just like, I get that, but I'm going to keep doing it. And it was so important for me to meet Rachel, because Rachel is one of the only, like the few women I know, it sucks, that are like, yes, we're going to do it. And we're going to do it tomorrow. Like, and we're eager, because I feel like so often, I think young people in general, but especially women, can be like, I guess we'll see. And I think just setting a deadline and being like there was a point where I was like, maybe it'll be next summer. And Rachel was like, it needs to be next summer. I've told everyone it's going to be next summer that we should.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you really just have to be like, we're doing it, because it's like no one, I just feel like, yeah, you have to say it and then do it, because no one else is going to be like, sure, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm assuming that you had a lot of connections from NYU in terms of getting your crew together and maybe funding for the film. Is there anything you can talk about, like regarding like people who have no connections whatsoever, pretend you're in that position and, you know, you need a crew, you need funding. Like, do you have any advice for filmmakers trying to go about it that way?
Totally. We didn't have any connections for funding. We thought that we did, and we tried all of those routes and they didn't work. We applied for multiple grants, you know, that went through the school and didn't. We collectively had all interned for so many different production companies, and all of them said no, in terms of like taking on the movie to do it. The whole movie ended up being financed through mostly people who'd never invested in film before. And we made it for a really small budget. It was a micro budget of 250, I think it was less than that. I think it was around 200,000. And, you know, you literally, what I would say is, I think the most important piece of advice, you separate from crew, which I think you can establish from just trying to get on sets, networking, and not being like, hi, like but just talking to people genuinely and getting coffee with them. And like, you know what I mean? Just like being a real person. Like, you don't have to be like, I'm going to put on my network hat. Like, you just can try to meet as many people as you can through friends, through anybody that you know. And I think that applies for both crew and trying to get on set and money. Like, you just have to be completely shameless, which is what we all ended up becoming, me and our producers and everybody. We did not leave one person unharassed, like just asking everybody in our life for a little bit of money, is how this movie ended up getting financed, including, I'd say the only producer that had invested in film before was an incredible EP named Rhiannon Jones. And I met her through a filmmaker at another festival. So, you know, going to that festival And she was the first filmmaker that was like, oh, I'll introduce you to my financiers. Like, I'll introduce you to people who helped make my movie. And it was the first time someone's done that for me. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to pay it forward, because everyone's so like sometimes like cagey about like who financed their movie. Because I think sometimes people don't want to admit it's like a close relative or this or that. And that's totally fine. That's how movies get made. But anyway, all to say, you have to ask everybody and not be shameless. And that also goes back to the female thing, because I think people are like, I don't want to, that's like kind of like like, I don't want to like go in there and like beg them for money. And there's just no other way you're going to make your movie.
And we're all, and I know I'm getting totally, detailed and technical here, but were all of your asks like in person, or did you have things go just through email, or like did you create a pitch treatment? Like, how did you go about the asks?
No, it's so important. We like did trial and error a few ways. Like, we initially had like a very detailed pitch deck that explained to someone who'd never invested in film how the waterfall goes, and that was stuff that we also had to learn too, in terms of like just if you invest, where the money goes, and how, if you're going to get it back, how you're going to get it back. And so we had sort of a version of explaining that within like a pitch deck, describing, for us it was like, here's the short film, here's all the festivals it got into, here's all the reviews on it, here's all the this and all of that. And at the same time, I was working on getting my visa. So it's almost like I was duplicating my visa, everything that I was like, look at the success of me as a filmmaker. So that we went ahead with that, which I do think was helpful. But then we had a lot of in-person conversations with family, friends, like, but there was also a lot of phone calls. I was lucky that not lucky, but the timing worked, because I went back to Toronto while I was waiting for my new visa. So I had a few conversations with family, friends, but most of those people didn't say yes until our real like EP, who had experience, Rhiannon, came on board, because no one wants to be the first person. So once Rhiannon came in, it was mostly via email and phone calling, of just being like, hey, this person gave us, and now we've cast, Diana Agron, and now we've cast Molly Gordon or Polly Draper. And just slowly we asked so many people a million times before they said yes. And a lot of it was phone calls and emails. But I do think, if you can, in person is great. And I tried to lay the groundwork earlier on, even though it took a while for these people to eventually say yes, with in-person conversations, for sure. And then but the second sort of round of a thing we had was a lookbook, like not less of like a here's how you invest in film, because our third producer, Lizzie, was like, that's what we're for, and that's what our lawyer's for. Like, you don't need to like put that in like a long, boring document. Just put a lookbook together. Just describes their vision, describes the characters, and just make it completely creative. And that worked. But then also there ended up being some investors who'd never done it before, who were like, I want this explained to me. And we were like, we can't call. So it was totally just hit and miss. And you just have to sort of know as much as possible about every single aspect, and just study up. And be ready to talk about whatever people are curious about. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you're very courageous and resourceful, because you're like totally embracing like every aspect of this process, because a lot of the stuff you're doing is definitely more of like a producer type or executive producer type role. But as the director, like you're totally going, into that territory without any reservations either. So I think that's helpful.
Thank you. I think that's all directors of their first feature are producers. Like that's just, and sometimes the lead actors, like, that's just, usually you're not getting paid and the producers aren't getting paid, and you have to split. You're the beginning. No one wants your baby to be made more than you. So you're going to end up being the producer and just not really credited for it, which is, everyone kind of knows that. So I didn't really know it, but I was happy to do it. Like I just, I wasn't aware. I looked at all my favorite filmmakers and I was like, oh, so they all produced their first films. But anyway, I appreciate you saying that. But I think it comes with the territory.
And we have two questions, which, two people are very much wanting you both to do another project together. So do you have anything in mind specifically, like the thing you wrote? Are you ready to put that into development, or?
Yeah, I mean, the next thing that we wrote, we have actually set up, and we're hopefully going to make it next year. it's that just to give a tease. Can I say what it's about, Rachel? Or
I think so. I don't know.
It's about these like two nerdy queer girls who start like an underground fight club at their high school to win over the cheerleaders from like the football players. It's very like Saved-esque, or like Wet Hot American Summer, like very campy and ridiculous and fun, but for like a modern queer sort of 2020 teen audience. So that's our next thing.
It sounds awesome.
Yeah. And I think we just both want to keep writing together and making stuff together.
And I have a sort of corny question, because this is a total like middle-aged woman question. I'm just going to preface it. But like, you know, I'm like almost 2 decades older than you probably. So what are some of the things that you worry about in terms of self-realization? Like, what are the challenges you have like in this day and age, and like broadly speaking for your generation? Because, you know, when I was growing up, like I had some of the same exact type of situations and fears and anxieties, but I also feel like you're in a generation where everything is so public with social media. You know, everything you do is so public, and you, instead of, you know, the ways that I met people at your age, it like a lot of this is through apps and all of these, you know, alternative ways of finding love. So can you talk about some of, you know, like your challenges in terms of self-realization?
Yeah, I don't think that's a corny question at all. And I think like we speak low to the social media aspect of it, but I do think that but it's like, who knows, maybe every generation has it a different kind of way. But I do think social media and apps and whatever have sort of like contributed to like a sort of mass, at least in New York, like hookup culture, which is totally fine. But it's like kind of, it's just hard. It's just like annoying, and like no one wants to communicate. Our generation has a problem communicating, even if it's casual or not. It's just, there's no communication whatsoever. I think that's something due to social media and stuff. And then I will say, you know, yeah, like sugaring isn't an issue, but everything's just on the table, and you're like, okay, I can Tinder, I can sugar, I can this, I can that, and, you know. I think that it's great to grow up in a time as women where everything's so liberated, but then that can also feel like something that is so easily like, I'm an empowered young woman in New York dating around. And then you're like, oh my God, this is so sad. You're like, oh no, about them. So I think that it's sort of it's something that's very attractive. And then it can be like, if you're not careful, you can just flip on its head. And then I think as like a filmmaker or creative person, I also feel like social media has sort of, in terms of it being a challenge, like at least in film school, I was like, do I need to be like a model now? Like I was like, it seems like the film school thing is having a huge Instagram following. Like it was like, wait, do I need to suddenly direct music videos? Because that's what everyone sort of know what everyone's doing and what everyone's up to, and it becomes such a like weird like mind game competition thing. So I think that's how social media has affected my insecurities and anxieties in terms of self-realization. But I'll let Rachel speak to social media, because that is like the bulk of our conversations when it comes to being like, how's your day? And your stress. Usually about
oh my God. Well, I feel like, I mean, just in terms of what you were saying about hookup culture and like dating, I do feel like it's like with Instagram, it's like there's just a million people and everyone's hot and the best and like whatever. And you can also find out like every person someone's ever dated, and like if they're liking their stuff, you can follow them, who that person's brother is. Like I have found it all out. I know. And if you have an Instagram, I will look at it. So it's like that. And then for me, like a big part of my comedy is online, especially now during the pandemic. And like my Twitter, I have I do a lot of comedy on there, and I feel like it started like before I had a ton of followers, I was always tweeting from like this really raw, honest place. And that like is where I feel like I got a big following, is being really open about my romantic relationships and my feelings. And now it's interesting because I still want to be honest and real, but then it's like, I'm tweeting about someone, they're gonna see it, like that if I went on a date, you know what I mean? So it's a change certain things. And sometimes it can feel like intense being online because people are like fighting with each other or like saying mean stuff. And so yeah, I have a hard time with it because I love it so much. Like I love expressing myself on social media and like being funny or do like whatever, putting out my comedic voice. But there's also some times where it feels like one of those things where it's like you can't get away from it. You need to do it, but it's exhausting. Yeah.
I feel like also this as a comedian, as from an outside perspective, like there's so much pressure, especially with COVID. It feels like you cannot be a successful comedian and not be super huge on Twitter or whatever your platform is. But it seems like Twitter is the one that you have to do. And that seems like where there's the most like grossness and people being so mean. I think they're poetry.
You constantly have to be like smart and witty and like it's like, oh, it's like you went viral yesterday, but that was like you have to like always be having like a new take or thought. Yeah,
that's why I suck at Twitter. I feel like I'm much more of an Instagram person because you can just put an image up that, you know, is interesting to you. And it's like a diary almost, you know? But with Twitter, you're right. Like you do always have to be on and clever and sort of like, I don't know, like aware of everything going on in popular culture. Like who said what and what's trending. And it's a lot. I don't know. My husband constantly tells me you have to have a Twitter account, and I try, but I don't know how to do it right. So
don't do it. It will break your brain. Falling on. The other thing is if I like log off for like 2 days, I come back on and I'm like, I missed everything.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a joke that I missed. It's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, with that, I'm like. Well, thank you both. I really appreciated your honesty, candidness. You're both so amazingly talented, and I'm sure I'm not alone when I say we cannot wait, you know, to see what you both do next. And when does the show come out, Rachel, just so we can keep an eye on it?
I think they actually announced a premiere date today. I believe it is January 13th, but if it's not that exact day, it's the day in January.
Okay, great. and also, how do we find like your live stand-up comedy? Like, is there any place we should go to check for that?
I have a set on Comedy Central. I also have a digital series that I made with my friend Io Debris, who's also a super funny comedian, that is also on Comedy Central. And then my Twitter, where I put like all my tweet jokes, is _Sennott.
Okay. Well, thank you both so much. Good luck with the rest of your festival circuit events.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this conversation. This was so lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, have a great night. Take care.
You too.
Thanks to everyone out there who came out.
Thanks to everyone for the questions and the lovely comments and checking it out.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.